welcome back to CXpert Share, the podcast where we have real CX experts talk about real issues facing our industry. And today I'm pleased to have Matthew with me. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his organization before we jump in. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brandon.
And so tell us your role, your company. Give me a little bit about C3 for those that don't know.
Sure. So started C3 in November of 2008 at the depths of the Great Recession. Awesome time to start a business. And it's going on about 16 years. So started this from my couch, and there are 39 of us today. And CX is either number one or number two most important technology that we're focused on with our clients today.
Very good, very good. And I know, because I know your business. I know you have people all over, and I know you do business all over. But I do like to cover location just because I often get attendees or customers who say, "Well, do you know anybody local to me? Like, is anybody around?" So
Sure.
I know you have people everywhere, so you can state some of those places. But where are you guys located? Some of your primary places?
We're focused mainly in the Midwest. So we've got sales folks in Grand Rapids, Chicago, Indianapolis, and Detroit. So that's where we are today. I don't want to be in every time zone around the world for today. We're really just focused on the Midwest.
Okay, awesome. And I've had the pleasure of visiting you guys and getting up there. So I like that. I love the area. I love the vibe and the culture. So I'm gonna jump right in with our audience. There's a lot we want to cover, and the primary subject, the title of this one is the impact of EX on CX. So for those of you watching, EX stands for the employee experience, and I'm just going to call it like it is. I mean, because I've been a contact center leader, operator. Now I'm on the other side of technology, but I will tell you too often in companies, the employees in the contact center are undervalued. There's some of the one of the guys I was talking to that day joked and said that a lot of times the contact center employee is the last person to the buffet when there's when there's something happening in the business. And yet these people have a tremendous impact, a huge impact on the customer and how the customer sees the business in general. So I want to frame this up, Matthew. I want to talk about not just the importance of the employee, because I want to explain their value in both altruistic and business terms. But then I want to get into, okay, now that we accept their value, how can we retain them? How can we reward them? How can we be sure that we can hold on to our greatest assets? And some of those things may go beyond the contact center. But I want to first start it off by with your expertise answering a question that I struggle to answer in this day and age, is that why are there still so many companies that devalue the actual agent? In your opinion, I know it's a subjective question, but it still seems to me like the value of the contact center in general and the people that are in there, it hasn't reached the point, in my opinion, this is me personal, in my opinion, it hasn't reached a point where companies are appreciating the employees for what they actually do or bring to the organization.
Boy, I still think there's folks at the top that believe there's interchangeability of folks. Like when they see a contact center that's 200, 300, 500,000 people, and they just simply look at a report of, well, there were 1,000 people last month and there's 980 now. It's like, what are you going to do? So just like they're just overwhelmed by, how many people are moving in and out. And it's so hard to actually just put in a strategy just because there's just overwhelmingness at the size of this. And to a certain extent, contact center folks are, no fault of their own, more transient. Like I don't know how long the average contact center worker stays in place, but it's not that long. It's probably shorter than the average job. And to me, like one of the things that I think about from a C3 perspective is like, I think there's a competitive advantage in holding on to good people longer. So that is, so like I see that as a significant advantage. So like to me, I think of those organizations and I think to myself, who has the KPI of retaining who are identified as your top people? And
Hmm.
if there is like a good place to start this conversation, that would be one that I'd be asking leaders in this space. Who owns that KPI? You know, like we talk, like I think the phrase is something like you measure what you manage and you manage what you measure. If
Right.
you're not managing that and you're not measuring that, well, that's a problem. That might be a good place to start. Like, who are the
Mm.
top, you know, like, all right, so let's just say, hey, you got a thousand people in your space. Maybe it's really hard to evaluate all these guys, but I'll bet you could probably figure out who your top 50 to 100 are. And then
Hmm.
somebody in your organization, you're going to look at that person once a quarter and say, we had 100 of those people last month. How many of them do we have now?
Mm.
And that
Okay.
being one of those things that you manage and measure, manage, that kind of feedback loop. But I don't know if that's happening today. And most of the time when I ask that of our clients, I kind of get a little bit of a, well, we do our best we can to retain our people. It's like, no, that's not what I'm asking. Like, what does
Yeah.
that plan look like? Because for the solutions and technology that we're going to be looking at, that should feed into whatever this plan is. That's got to be a thing.
Right.
So because I feel like you can have really good products, you can have, you know, really good X, really good Y, but if they have a bad interaction with one of your people, none of this other stuff matters.
That's
So,
true.
um,
That's
so I,
true.
so I don't know, like I like this idea that you start with something very simple and you start with EX with your best people.
And I think to some degree, because you just mentioned that and this, and it reminded me, I think to some degree, people know that there's high churn, high attrition, low tenure in the contact center space. So it's almost like executives accept it. You
Mm.
know, like you said, I had 1,000 this week. I have 980 now. You know, I work in an industry where there's high attrition, so I'm just another cog in the wheel. You know, kind of instead of thinking like you're saying. And I love it from your aspect, not necessarily the contact center. I know you help your clients, but even you as a founder, CEO, as an owner of a business, because I think you recognizing it is what makes it happen, quite frankly. And I think in some places we deal with customers, clients who maybe the executive leadership hasn't recognized it yet. You know, they haven't recognized the importance of it. But
And,
let's
and
go
you
ahead.
use the word accept. I want to make one quick little riff on this. Like, let's just say that you do accept the fact that there is some kind of a drop off rate. Like, hey, look, like, you know, your average contact center worker is going to stay in place for 15 months. And maybe the average really good contact center rep stays in place for 22 months.
Mm-hmm.
Let's at least see if we can bump this up internally at our organization to 26 or 27 months.
Yeah.
Like we're not going to hold on these people for 10 and 20 years. Like, let's not be realistic, but let's at least measure where we are versus where our competition is. And let's at least start from there, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So that is something that I can at least consume, is baselining what this looks like within my industry. And then I'm just trying to move that up all the time. So, hey, maybe last year we lost 10 of our top performers. This year it's 8. Like, let's
Yeah.
not say we're going to go from 10 to 0 overnight, but let's baseline it and measure it. And then someone's got to own that. Like, they've got to own that KPI.
I agree with that. And actually that's a perfect segue, because the thing I wanted to talk about is, let's say there's because we know there's members of our audience that do recognize the value of their employees. They do understand the importance of retaining them is more economical than trying to acquire new ones, or just put new butts in the seats. What are some things that you can offer based on your experience in this space on how to retain them? What are some of the things that you've seen, or that you'd mention as best practices for leaders who want to retain their top talent?
Within the contact center or in general?
In general, let's go in
In
general first.
general,
We'll narrow it down to kind
I think about personalization of you know I'm gonna give you an example. Just personalizations. Like, let's just say, hey, this person has done a wonderful job for me, and hey, thank you so much. I'd like to show you my appreciation, and here's $100. And that person goes, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
That same person, I know that they like model trains.
Mhm.
So I had someone in HR go out there and find some very rare model train and gift wrap
Mhm.
it and put a personal note in there and say, we appreciate you being a part of C3. And I
Awesome.
hope and I hope this is something that can go with the rest of your collection. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, heavens to Betsy. Someone actually thinks of me and like what I like. That the $100 Amazon gift card, it's like, okay, that's nice. But like that personalization's like that person knows me and they're speaking to me. And like this went like this happened a couple of years ago as well. Someone just said, you know what, it's been a long day around here, my back hurts. I'm like, I'm gonna go find someone that's gonna go help me buy them a really nice chair, so
Mhm.
I can go give them 100 or $200 on Amazon or something that isn't personalized. But if you can do a level of personalization, I think that that other person gets a feeling like who, like your boss appreciates you and knows who you are. So
Yes.
if there's any level of personalization there, I think that will help. I think they'll help you in retaining your folks.
Yeah.
So
I love that idea because we've seen that not only with employees, right? Uh, you like we travel a bit for work on occasion, and it's nice to have levels on in the loyalty program. It's nice when you check into the hotel and your name's on the TV screen because they know who you are, or they leave something in the room specific to your personality versus the normal. So I do feel like we've seen personalization both outside of the contact center industry and inside the industry be in my opinion the next it's the next thing, it's the next wow thing. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I can see how that would apply to an employee. You know what I mean? And that personal recognition, I can imagine would mean a hell of a lot more, honestly, than
yeah.
a gift card.
So I think that gift says like a couple things in one. It says, yeah, like I know you and I appreciate you, and I think that
Mhm.
that's like two in one versus just something that's not personalized.
Right.
The other thing I think about, like when I think about retention, is sometimes we call it C3, like mental oil changes. Like like you've got to have these conversations, and it's not just like, how is this vendor, how is this client, how is this product? It's like, how are you doing?
Mhm.
Like if you don't have those mental oil changes all the time, that car is going to break down.
Mhm.
So and it you're you're having that other person sit on your virtual leather couch, or maybe it's an actual leather couch, and
Mhm.
you're just showing that care for that person. And even if it's only 5 minutes, like every couple weeks, I think it goes a long way, and I feel like that other person feels like they're cared for. So even if you don't care about the other person, at least the other person would feel like they're being cared for if you
Right.
just give them a moment. And every once in a while, it's like, hey, like this is going on in my life, and that's going on in my life, and that's going on in my life. And then all of a sudden you can put their job performance and who they are into a little bit more context as well. I
Mm.
think it'll help you actually be a manager versus just like, how are the numbers, how are these customers. So again, it's a little bit, it helps you even in your efforts to be more personalized, understanding like what's going on in their lives. Do
Yeah.
it, just do it this much to start, and I think it's a good investment of time.
You'll probably see the benefit from it. I wanna ask you something that I get asked often. So it's just your opinion. And that is in the contact centers when they were brick and mortar, it was a lot easier to drive and control culture. It was a
Mm,
lot easier to say, hey, this is the type of team I'm going to have, or the type of leader I'm going to be, or the type of impact I'm going to have, because everyone's in one big room or a series of multiple rooms, but I could physically walk around and see them interact with them. One of the things that I still get asked, because even though we're in whatever variation of COVID we're in, there are a lot of companies that didn't go back to brick and mortar. They have hybrid environments, and some of them still have large numbers of their employees that are remote. Any tips or pointers to try to keep your culture healthy and happy in a hybrid environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, One is I feel like your culture might just be something that is easier to implement and keep up, like you said, when it is in person. But
Mm-hmm.
like when you do get to remote, you have to be very intentional instead of just, hey, things are just so it's almost like you have to have this mindset of I need to intentionally keep up, recreate whatever it is that you want with your culture because it just won't happen. I think there's, when you have all those people sit in one building, oftentimes just culture happens and it could be a very good thing. I don't think that really works in the world of remote. So you have to think to yourself, okay, when do people have water cooler moments? Do I have regional get-togethers? Am I making it mandatory that people are on video? Are we doing virtual lunch hours or virtual happy hours? But like the leader of that group, if it's a subgroup of the organization or someone in HR has to look and say, I'm going to intentionally create culture.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like when we kind of talked about KPIs before, it's hard to have a KPI around culture. I get it, but someone almost has to own that the answer to that question of, hey, how do we create culture here? That it's just not something that happens like it does spontaneously in person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it starts with that mindset, but I think there have to be cultural things on the calendar for people that are even remote. So it's like, hey, I'm going to see them in person once or twice per year, but like once or twice a week, we're going to go do this or we're going to go do that. Like for instance, for example, like at C3, there's a whole bunch of sub teams
Oh,
about like, hey, there's this is an investing group and this is a workout group, and there are some people that take part in these teams.
mm-hmm.
So at C3, we like to do like virtual happy hours. We have these team kind of get-togethers, even though it's just for the most part chatting. But then also we're just very big on video then as well, because I think that this is one of the ways that you can actually build relationships, seeing someone's emotion on their face, how heck even seeing the things that are going on in their background.
Yeah.
So, but I'll again start with
Yeah.
that thought of this just all being very intentional.
And it's interesting. Interesting. I intentional. I'll be honest with you, is one of my favorite words. It's actually on my vision board for this year because it's something I'm working on. And I think you make an excellent point because, like you said, in an in-person interaction, things kind of get picked up and they happen. And if you do that enough, you can kind of create a culture based on the visual. But when you don't have that, you have to be purposeful about how you're going to do that. Um, I want to talk about next is kind of a byproduct. So we're talking about how EX impacts CX. But there's a funny thing that we've talked about, and I actually want to bring it up on the podcast about a what must be a disconnect, right? We'll just call it that, right? Because we talk about the level of service being provided, and when you go in to assess an organization or whatever, you may have leadership or someone saying, hey, things are great, or this is the level of service we're providing based on whatever metrics or knowledge they have. And yet we hear from customers and we see industry stats that says it ain't really that good. So from your perspective, what have you heard that you think contributes to this misalignment? Like, why do you think that is?
Boy, I think I almost see this like IT folks. Like every once in a while, we'll talk to an IT executive, and I'll get I'm
Mhm.
just using this as a story for a moment, and they think to themselves, man, we have all the tools and all the stuff that we need for all of our employees to be very productive and this and that. And then you actually talk to the customers and like, we don't use these tools. These are clunky over here. And the
Mhm.
feedback methodology that they're using to inform that decision is not very good. So
Uh,
it's like, and they're just putting on this rosy exposition of like, well, I haven't heard anyone complain, so therefore it must be really good.
mhm.
So I think that I think for some of these folks, I think they actually believe that they're providing for a good experience, but I wonder if that feedback loop is a good one. How are they getting that feedback? Are they just talking to their best customers? Are they only talking to their best employees? What does that look like? So versus it just being your own gut intuition.
Mhm.
So I think about just their level of being informed and what their feedback loops look like. And if it isn't feedback loops from all these different kinds of folks in different forums, like I get these through sentiment analysis on calls to surveys to like all of this stuff, then
Mm.
I don't think you get a full view of exactly what that looks like. So, and that's why I think there's part of it. And I think that's why there's a disconnect. They're just not getting all of that feedback from all these different channels.
Yeah, yeah. I could see how that would be a miss. I want to double back to one thing in the culture. We talked about, some of the things you can do in a hybrid environment. But just like in any relationship, work relationship, personal relationship, whatever, communication is key, and being able to be like-minded. And I want to, as I like to do in this podcast, I like to have like real, I always say I have real experts talking about real things. And you have a specific thing within your culture that I think contributes to your organization being able to communicate exceptionally well. You want to share a little bit about the book club that you have?
Yeah. It was a few years ago that one of the C3ers that came on board said, "Hey, this is something that we did at my old company, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm always interested in how we can make our culture, our organization better every day." Said
Hmm.
we took this one book and we broke it down and we talked about it, and it was a good bonding experience for the whole organization. So we took that and ran with it about 3.5 years ago, and we have read about 20 books internally as an organization. And we have essentially created our own organization's book club. So now that we're 39 people, we actually have to break this into smaller subgroups. But
Right.
what's kind of what is interesting is when you pick a book and you assign this out and you all come together and you talk about the ideas. There's so many things that this does. It builds culture because you're reading, you're literally reading from the same sheet of music.
Hmm.
You start to build this vocabulary as well. We use words like radical candor here, which is a book by itself, and
Hmm.
we've read Extreme Ownership from Jocko Willink. And when you say certain words, even whether it's the title or one of the parables within the book, we all know what the other person is talking about. And
Hmm.
they're shortcuts to communication. So someone can come to me and say, "Hey, I want to give this feedback because I don't want this person to be a Bob." And I know based upon Kim Scott's Radical Candor book what that means. And there's so much nuance in that statement that that would take 5 or 10 minutes to explain. But
Uh,
in that person saying that one phrase, I know exactly what she's saying and I get it.
mhm.
So you can use these communication shortcuts, and I think it makes for better internal communication. I think we're all growing in a certain direction. And by the way, based upon what your organization's values are, you might pick different books, so they might
Mhm.
reinforce those values that you're trying to get across to all your people. So I think there's a litany of reasons why you should look to do that. At a minimum, I believe that leadership of an organization should get together and do that, but if you have a smaller organization like mine, I feel like the whole organization should do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that even in a contact center environment, like you said, you may do it on a smaller scale, like maybe do it with your team, you know, or your department or something like that. I do think that there are some things you know, you leading it, of course, makes people more open to participating and stuff like that. You have everybody, you know, you have sub teams reading, and then you talk about it. Just you promoting it and people knowing that there's a purpose to reading it. You know, like we're going to get together, we're going to talk about it, we're going to dissect it. I think adds value to it. So I like that. So we talked about you know, culturally creating a good place where your top talent wants to be there. I want to talk about one that's a little stickier in there. There are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of employees that are, you know, making decisions to move or not move. Some of them are based on income, right? Some of them are based on, you know, some job offering more. And different companies are in different competitive environments. So some may be able to improve their salary and some can't. Um, are there, just off the top of your head, other than salary, uh, anything you wanna offer, you add that you think, and specific to a contact center environment, did you think somebody might be able to do to make their, you know, to improve morale or to make the employees feel better at work?
Um, I feel like there are a couple of things. The first one is if someone, especially for folks that are very good at their job, they need time off. They're not requesting it. They're just going to take it, and it really doesn't matter if it fits within your own product launch or whatever. When they want to take vacation is when they're going to go take vacation. And by the way, they might take a little bit more vacation than even you're comfortable with. So like you have these things that you can control, and they're being pretty much a, hey, there is, as long as you're telling me 2 weeks in advance, you can take
Yeah.
the time off that you need whenever you need it. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, I would absolutely start with that. For C3, we have a business coach here because sometimes you may not want
Oh,
your mental oil change happen from the guy that's asking you to hit your number. So
exactly.
we have a business coach that is outside the organization who is not W2'd, and you can essentially sit on his virtual leather couch and talk about, hey, I'm doing this, I'm trying this, these things aren't working, but
Wow.
that guy doesn't have a dog in the race. So
Mm-hmm.
so we've done some of that stuff. Obviously, we're not a contact center, but like, but maybe if you're a big enough contact center, maybe there is that one person that
Yeah.
anyone can kind of get in this guy's schedule and just say, can I get half an hour, 45 minutes and talk to you about this stuff? Because they might not be feel comfortable with their boss, or their boss is like quota driven or whatever. It's someone that's tangential to the organization. It's like they know the organization, but they're not responsible for revenue growth and this and that. So I would throw that piece out there then as well. Um,
Yeah. I love that.
um, yeah, beyond that, I think personalization in all things. Like everything from the shirts that they are provided, with the company logo on it, to the gifts that they might receive here and there, and even like something like, hey, this person's grandparents passed away. The organization is always sending flowers and stuff, and
Yeah.
just all of these like little things around the periphery that make someone feel like that the organization, that the people around them actually do care.
Yeah.
So if you
I
can do all those things.
Man, I love that. I am aware, and the name eludes me right now, so I'll probably try to find it to share. But there's actually an organization, because a lot of people in the contact center don't feel comfortable, like you said, talking to their manager who's driving them on KPIs, or even going to human resources or HR, because unfortunately with the high churn and high performance and stuff, HR isn't seen in a positive light in a lot of contact centers, and most people don't proactively go talk to them. But I do know of organizations that hire third party counselors, and I don't mean a part of their health plan or anything like that. I mean coaches that you can interact with. So that's definitely a good thing. All right, and wrapping here, I always like to give an opportunity because again, I like this to be practical. There are leaders out there, contact center and otherwise. You are a successful leader. I will tell you that as someone who not just knowing you, I know your employees, so I know your so I can speak frankly about your culture and the success of your organization. I'd like to give a couple practical tips. So leader to leader, C level to C levels in the audience. What's one or two things that you want to share that maybe you wish you knew when you were starting out, or maybe you just think is good practices for leaders?
Oh man. I'll throw two things. I could sit here and do this for a while. There's maybe two things that come to mind. Um, I know it's hard to do within your organization when your organization's like, where are my numbers this month? Where are my numbers for this quarter? Where are my numbers for this year?
Mm-hmm.
But everything at C3 is based on long-term results. And everything you're gonna achieve right now is probably from the groundwork that you've laid somewhere between months and months ago to years and years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So try the best you can to take all these short-term demands and focus your vision and your leadership on more long-term stuff. Because the stuff you're going to harvest today is going to happen because the stuff you did in 2022 and 2023 versus the things that you're just like, you're pushing to get in, right now. So I do think that this push constantly for short-term results and pushing like, hey, we got to get this thing in, but before the end of the month, it's like little grains of salt in a gigantic system of gears. And you
Mm-hmm.
dump enough pieces of sand in this gigantic machine of gears. And one day, one of those gears just kind of pops off, and you're like, "What happened? I don't know. I don't know what grain of sand ultimately made this gear stop turning, but I
Right.
threw enough in over time. And to me, every time I take one of those little shortcuts, every time I demand something happen today and not tomorrow because I have short-term thinking, I think you put in one more grain of sand into these gears, but you don't know which gear is going to fall off on what day. So
Wow.
I'm trying to throw as few little pebbles of sand as I can into these series of gears. And I do that through just focus on long-term planning, long-term all the time. So that's this one. I'll give you the provocative one. You
Mm-hmm.
should go fire your worst client.
Uh-oh.
So
Look at
so go get rid of the person who none of your customer service people want to deal with, or that is just the plague of your organization within reason. Hey, your biggest client accounts for 50% of your revenue. Don't come to me when your company collapses after you've gotten rid of them. So like all of this within reason, but go get
right.
rid of your worst client because they are ones that are making your employee retention more difficult. They're the ones that you're thinking about when you're going to sleep at night. And if they
Mm-hmm.
aren't worth that squeeze, don't just hold on to them because they're paying a check
Yeah.
every month.
Wow. Well, I'll be honest with you. I wish we were doing this live because I'm sure when people watch this, there's gonna be people applauding both of those because I can tell you as someone who's come up in a contact center so many times, I wish my team lead or manager or even the director, I wish they had long-term thinking. Because you know what I thought about when you were saying that last one? Not only was I thinking about the trauma associated with having to talk to that person myself as an agent, but you know what I don't think my manager realized is after anybody on our team got that call, there's probably about 5 to 8 of us that sat around talking about it
Mm.
before instead of taking another call. Just being honest, because we had to convince about it. We had to help that agent, recover from their experience, and we had to share in the like-minded things. So just the productivity alone is worth dropping that troublesome client. So I love
And
that, man.
And you go to that analogy, like every time someone in your organization takes that call, you're probably dropping one more pebble of sand into that series of gears.
Yeah,
And at some point in time, one of those gears is going to stop working. You don't know when, you don't know where. It's just going to
yeah.
happen. So I'm trying to get rid of all the sources of all that sand.
Yeah, that's a great visual. Hopefully you guys out there get that one, you know, because your business is a series of gears into working together. And unfortunately there is too much sand being placed on there. And the worst kind of sand in my opinion, and this is not against anyone who may be listening, this just wants I think awareness, self-awareness is important. To me, the worst kind of sand isn't the sand that is inherent in the way you do business, you know, because there is some industries that sand sprinkles in just because of the business that it is.
Yeah.
The worst kind of sand for me is the man-made sand. It's when
Mm,
you can't get out of your own way. It's when you internally either have people or processes that are creating sand to put into the gear. So I'd say avoid that when you can. Matthew, always great talking to you. So you guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to listen in. All the information about how to contact Matthew and C3 is embedded in the body here. So take a look at that. Reach out to them. They could be a great benefit to your organization. Subscribe so you can follow along and learn about the other CX experts we're coming up on future shows. Thanks for joining us.
thanks, everybody.
And